Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be sharing my time with member for King's Hands. I rise today to speak on Bloc Quebec Opposition Day motion to stop non-denominational prayer we have at the beginning of each day in the House. This month, Angus Reid Institute, in partnership with Cardus, published a report that offers a comprehensive, first-of-its-kind look at the faith journeys of Canadians, not just amongst the majority religious community, but across religious spectrum. 1 in 5 Canadians, that's 19%, are classified as non-believers. For 4 in 5, however, there is some openness to God or spirituality. The cultural mosaic in Canada is ever shifting. While those born in Canada continue to shift further into a-religious identities, being raised in a religious tradition is common in Canada. 72% say they grew up with religious teachings. As a Hindu Canadian, I concur that Canadians raised in Hindu faith tend more towards the privately faithful. With this said, the prayer we have, in my view, is more a tradition that is part of the fabric of the society in our Christian majority Canada. I support we continue with the current practice. Many Hindu Canadians, during the Christmas time, have lighted Christmas tree in their homes. It does not mean Hindus are practicing Christianity, but it is embracing the culture and heritage of the society we live in. The prayer we have every day, while it is reflective of the different religions embraced by Canadians, it also represents the culture and heritage of our country. Let us look at this practice of the prayer we have from the historical perspective. Although the practice of reading a prayer at the start of each sitting was not codified in the standing orders until 1927, it has been part of the daily proceedings of the House since 1877. Much later, suggestions were made to rewrite or reword the prayer in a non-sectarian form. Until 1994, no major change to the form of the prayer was made aside from references to royalty. At that time, the House concurred in a report recommending a new form of prayer more reflective of the different religions embraced by Canadians. This prayer that we use now was read for the first time when the House met to open its proceedings on February 21, 1994. Let me quote Sir Gary Streeter, Member of Parliament in the United Kingdom, on a similar motion in the UK House of Commons in 2019. The crux of the argument for abolishing parliamentary prayers is that by taking all references to religion and God out of politics and public life, we will then have a truly neutral public square. However, that would just be to replace one worldview and set of beliefs to it another. As human beings, we all bring a set of beliefs about the world and the nature of human life to any debates around pursuing the public good. Secularists might argue that their worldview is the best on which to base the society, but they cannot do so by claiming neutrality. Rather than striving for a neutral public square, we should instead recognize that we are increasingly becoming a pluralistic society where a multitude of different beliefs and worldviews coexist. In a pluralistic society, freedom of belief is vital. Yet, this is not achieved by forcing all references to religion and God in public life to be pushed to one side. For those who do object, for whatever reason, there is no obligation to participate in the prayers. Let me now quote from an article by Martin Launayette in Canadian Parliamentary Review published in 2009. The form and content of the prayer recited in parliamentary legislatures is part of a debate that seeks to pit the special relationship each legislature has with its religious heritage against the desire to adopt this heritage to contemporary cultural realities. So why does the need for prayer persist despite the secular storm and the unending controversies? As stated in March versus Chambers, the traditions are often seen as a part of the fabric of the society. And at a time when contemporary societies are tending to be more diverse, the argument for tradition continues to occupy an important place in the collective imagination. A defensive reaction? Quite likely. A bastion of identity? Most definitely. All of which has not stopped many parliaments from wanting to take matters even further, not to weaken the old identity, but to breathe new life into it. If it is to be practiced, this ritual must be an act of recognition that focuses on uniting rather than dividing people. Simply eliminating the prayer is another option, but it is not an impartial one. It is not a more impartial one, since the adherents who have the same rights will feel they are victims of discrimination as well. Madam Speaker, there is a growing trend in our society to identify and amplify things that divide us than the things that unite us. The intolerance that is propagated today by those on the extreme left of the political spectrum is the same intolerance that was the cornerstone of the extreme right. In the name of political correctness, voices are being shut down, books are being banned, and any view or opinion that deviates even an inch from the far left ideology is immediately drowned out. Madam Speaker, the practice of praying does not mean that the state is in bed with religion. None of the issues we discuss and debate, none of the legislation we pass here are in any way or form connect any religion to the state. Let us continue the practice of the prayer we have out of the respect to over 80% of Canadians who practice one religious faith as the other. As a politician, I do go to temples, mosques, synagogues, churches, etc. But it does not mean that I associate the state with the religion. Since 2019, I've seen Bloc Québécois Opposition Day motions. Never once I've seen them propose anything that is of importance to Canadians' economic realities. Today, we are facing challenging times. The energy transition is going towards a battery. Quebec and Canada can become the leaders in the world in these alternative technologies. I've never seen Bloc Québécois presenting any motion on anything that is of economic importance. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Comments, l'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Near the end of his speech, my colleague, I don't know if that's what he wanted to insinuate, but that's what I understood, at least. For him, talking about state neutrality, it means that this House should not pray before question period. He said that this is a divisive topic. I would like to ask him how secularism can be understood as being divisive. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, 80% of Canadians practice one religious faith of the other. As I said, this is more of a cultural thing, a tradition of the country's heritage that we show every day in the morning.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable colleague for his comments. It's not always I agree with members on the other side, but today's debate I do find myself in agreement. So I have to ask myself why the Bloc would be bringing this question to this House when there are perfectly legitimate channels. I'm not dismissing the legitimacy of the question, but of the process. And so I'm wondering if my honourable colleague could comment on the motivation here. You know, I really do have issues with issues that are brought here for only divisive nature. He mentioned division in his speech. Is this simply an opportunity for a wedge issue? And how would the member comment on a party bringing wedge issues to this House?
The honourable member for Nepean.
Madam Speaker, as I mentioned, there's a tendency to identify and amplify the issues that divide us than the issues that unite us. This should not have been brought in my personal view. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Madam Speaker, when I was elected as a young member of Parliament, I was denounced from the Catholic Church and excommunicated for speaking up for the rights of same-sex couples, and I would do that again in a heartbeat. So I understand the importance of the separation of church and state. But that being said, this is not a debate that's happening out in civil society right now. What we're talking about in civil society is coming off a pandemic. We're talking about massively high inflation. We're talking about a housing crisis. We are talking about a climate crisis. We're talking about the right of women to protect their choices of their bodies, given what's happening in the United States. I'd like to ask my honourable colleague, what is it that he thinks is happening here when we're bringing forward a debate over a piece of parliamentary procedure that probably nobody in Canada has ever paid much attention to and nobody even knows exists, when there's so many other pressing issues to deal with?
The honourable member from the PN.
I certainly agree with the honourable colleague, Madam Speaker. In addition to the issues he mentioned, there are bigger issues that are facing our country. The knowledge-based economy is taking over the world, and we have to work hard to make sure that Canada is in the front of this new economy. We have to invest in new technologies, in artificial intelligence, in battery technologies, in genomics. These are the kind of things that we have to discuss, debate, and legislate upon than this particular issue. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For a brief question, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands. Brief answer. Brief question.
I'll try to point a very brief question to the honourable member for Nepean. The question of divisions, I wanted to point out something that I don't think has been necessarily clear in this debate, which is that the prayer happens before the doors open, and the prayer itself is not specific to any denomination, although it is theist. There's no question it is theist, but it doesn't reference, for instance, Jesus Christ, nor does it reference Muhammad. I just wonder if the honourable member had any thoughts on whether it makes a difference that this is a private prayer before the doors open.
A member for Nepean, a brief answer.
I agree with honourable member, Madam Speaker. As I said, for me, it is more of a cultural heritage of our country than a prayer to any one God.